It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We just discussed how wildfire smoke affects our health. Now we want to think about where it's coming from and why. Some of it is from Ontario, but much of it started on July 7th when lightning struck the woods of northern Minnesota. Those fires burned so hard, the Forest Service shut the boundary waters completely. And the fires went both directions. One crossed into Canada, another crossed out of it into Minnesota. Meanwhile, 4 Republicans in Michigan's delegation wrote to Canada's Prime Minister last week, demanding Canada manage its forests better. Their words, "We're done accepting apologies in place of action." This comes as the U.S. Forest Service, the agency that does that same work on this side of the border, has lost 16% of its workforce. Bobby Scopa fought fire for 45 years. She started as a seasonal firefighter in 1974 and finished as an operations section chief, the person on a major fire who decides where the crews go and where nobody goes at all. She's the author of Both Sides of the Fire Line, and she hosts the podcast Bobby on Fire. Bobby Scopa, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
We're happy that you're here as well. And I want to start here in Metro Detroit because we had among the worst air quality on the planet last week due to wildfire smoke. You spent 45 years at the other end of that smoke. What went through your head when you saw that headline?
Well, it's kind of a for me, having breathed so much smoke over my career and having lived places where always we're just inundated in smoke during the summertime. To me, it's kind of like, well, we're sharing the prize, the Christmas present with everybody else back east, because this is what most people in the West, or many places in the West, deal with all the time.
Yeah, this seems to be becoming the new normal for many of us. And, when I lived in the American West, I never thought living out there that so much of the reporting and the work I had been doing on wildfires would become relevant back here in the Midwest. I want to talk about where this smoke is actually coming from. Can you walk us through that?
Well, if you look at the models that we're seeing online, anyone can look up and see a lot of the smoke that's coming to your area is coming from the United States. I mean, there's plumes of smoke coming from the Pacific Northwest, and it's just, you can kind of see the stream of it flowing kind of to the east and to the north and circling around. And so it's not all coming from Canada. Much of it is our own U.S. smoke as opposed to Canadian smoke.
And of course,
it's tariff-free, I might add.
Did you say the smoke is tariff-free?
Yes, it's coming from the United States.
That feels like a very relevant comment in this moment, given President Trump's latest news about raising tariffs on Canada. I want to talk a little bit more, though, about wildfire before we get into the politics that are really surrounding this as well. And that's because wildfire itself is a natural ecological process. And I think that gets lost in a lot of these discussions, especially when we're choking on smoky air. Can you talk about that?
Well, let's go back a few hundred years and look at the landscape, United States, Canada. The landscape has always burned. If you think about the East Coast, there's natural fires that always occurred. New Jersey has a strong history of forest fires, and ecology, the plants evolved with fire. And southeast parts of the United States the same way. The Great Plains, they burned. That's how the plains of the Great Plains and the grasslands were maintained naturally, by lightning fires. And Native American burning, indigenous burning as well. And certainly throughout the West, it's a fire landscape. We live in a fire environment. We have become blind to it because we all live our comfortable lives in the suburbia, and we don't think about that. But if you live in small towns in the West, you are quite well aware that fire is a part of the environment that we live in. So the plants have evolved with fire, and many of the plants need fire to reproduce, and that's what we're dealing with. And if you think about, we started really actively fighting fires to put them out around 1900 and 1910, in that era. 1910 was a big year. Wisconsin burned up, the northern Rockies and the Northwest was burning up, and that precipitated the policies that the federal government used to start actively suppressing fires. So fires have always been a part of the landscape here in the United States.
And yet, Bobby, as much as they have been a part of the landscape for so long, you've said the fire seasons you're seeing now are changing dramatically. They're not the fire seasons you started in back in the 1970s. What specifically has changed?
Well, it's hotter and it's drier. And if it's hotter and drier, what's happening then to the fire season, instead, like when I started as a college student, I was fighting fires, and it was a great job for the summer because fire seasons tended to be 2 or 3 months long. And that's not the case anymore. Fire seasons, we call it a fire year now instead of a fire season. So what's changed is because it's hotter and drier, the fuels, the forest, the brush, the vegetation, the grass, the trees, they dry out sooner in the spring. Instead of maybe things drying out in June, where you can have a fire June and July and maybe in August when the rains come, now it's starting to burn in April, March. In the West, now they're burning really year-round. Right. And if you think about it, the longer you're away from any kind of moisture, if the snow melts off the forest in March, well, then you have a month before things are dry enough to start burning. Well, if the snow starts melting off the forest in February, then you've made the season start earlier. And if the rains don't come until later in the fall, then you've extended how long that season can go. So it's definitely a longer season, and a longer season means that the fuels get drier. So if you imagine that you take some vegetation that you dried, and you take it out and you put it in the sun, and it was really moist when you took it out and put it in the sun, and you leave it out in the sun for a month or two, well, it's going to have a certain level of dryness. If you leave it out in the sun for 6 months, you've made the fuels even drier. And when you make them drier, then they burn with more intensity. And if they're burning with more intensity, the fires can get larger. They become harder to extinguish.
And this is forgive me for jumping in, Bobby, sure, here, but all of this is happening because of climate change. I mean, this is why we are seeing these longer, drier, more intense fire seasons. Is that right?
That's correct. And not only do we have climate change, there's also the natural undulations of climatic, the weather. And if you think about the 70s, the 60s and 70s were a wetter, cooler time without climate change. Well, then we come out of a cooler, wetter time, and then you exacerbate it with climate change, and then it's really set up for disaster.
So all of this means that essentially pouring more resources into fighting fires, the way that we fight fires, supporting firefighters. I mean, this is something you're really focused on, and this gives us an understanding of why you are focused on supporting firefighters and supporting more broadly the institution of firefighting. I wonder if you could take me onto a fire line. What am I looking at? What am I holding? What's coming at me?
Well, let's imagine we're on a hotshot crew, and the hotshot crews. Then there's lots of different kinds of hand crews, but hotshot crews are some of our best, our most experienced, our most capable crews. And those folks, it's a 20-person group, and they tend to be younger people because it's hard work. And those folks on the line are cutting. They're cutting what would look like a trail through the vegetation, and that trail might be 3-4 feet wide. That's down all the way with what we call the mineral soil. So they're using chainsaws, they're using shovels, they're using Pulaskis, which is kind of like an axe. They're using different cutting hoses. It's just hard labor, and they're brushing back, meaning they're cutting the brush, they're cutting the vegetation, and they've got to make a cleared area so that the fire cannot cross that fire line to keep spreading. Now, that work that's being done, that hard, arduous labor, is oftentimes right on the fire's edge. And so, because you have to have what we call a black line. So you put a line in, and you got to have it. There can't be any live green vegetation between the fire and your line, because the fire will just come and overrun your fire line. So it's smoky, it's dusty. My word for it was always, we're sleeping with our face in the dirt, because when it's time to get some rest, oftentimes you just stop where you are and you lay down to get some rest, and you're literally getting a nap with your face in the dirt, and you're drinking hot water. You might not get showers for a week or more. It's unhealthy in terms of the air quality they're breathing. It's tough on the bodies. Old firefighters often have bad shoulders, bad knees. It's tough work.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Bobby Scopa, 45 years fighting wildfire, retired operations section chief, author of Both Sides of the Fire Line. We're talking about where this wildfire smoke is actually coming from and what it takes to fight it. And of course, Bobby, there are plenty of politics entwined in all of this. 4 members of Michigan's own congressional delegation wrote to Canadian Prime Minister Carney this week. They said, if Canada won't manage its forests, the United States will act on our own, including, in their words, direct involvement in cross-border fuel reduction and firefighting capacity. Bobby, you ran fire operations. What would that even look like?
Well, it's just that's spoken without any knowledge of really what is going on the ground. I was the fire chief for the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest up in Washington, 4 million acres, and we were on the east slope of the Cascades, basically from the Canadian border almost to Oregon. And I can't tell you how many times my fires were spreading across the actual fire, not just the smoke, but the fire was going across the border to Canada. And there were times that their fires were coming across to me. It's just the nature of a natural system. The smoke absolutely was going across the border. So it's really, everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's working hard to control the fires. We get help from the Canadians constantly. Every summer, every year, they're coming down to help us out, because oftentimes we have more problems than they do. And then oftentimes we send help to help them. We send our hotshot crews up across the border to help them. So I don't know where this comes from, about that they need to do a better job of managing their forest Um, we work hard at managing our forest, and we have a lot of fires. Um,
I
it's a,
want
it's
to I
it's
want
a,
to
it's
think
an
about this other side just for another moment if we could, because people who signed on to that letter might say this isn't about blaming Canada. It's about frustration, and that nothing can be done is a convenient answer for agencies that have been failing at this for decades. They'd point out, let's say, that the US has genuinely expanded prescribed burning and thinning, and in places it has worked. So, why is it unreasonable to ask Canada to do the same thing?
Well, Canada is doing the same thing. It's kind of like when people say, "Well, why don't they just put the fires out?" Well, of course they're trying to put the fires out. That's that's what, of course, they're doing, and they are doing fuels work. They are cutting timber, but they have millions and millions of acres of timber that is and vegetation that is miles from communities and towns and that sort of thing. It's Canada has vast open landscapes. We have it's easier for the United States because we have more people, more concentrated in areas. So to say, well, why don't they just do more prescribed burning? Well, they are, and they are doing fuels work. It's just a silly kind of a comment to make, and uneducated. I'm sure well intentioned, but uneducated. And if folks would ask some questions to people who have experience and who have experience north of the border, south of the border, they could get some real information.
So, you've flown over that country, and what you're saying is oftentimes there's not even a road to get a crew in there.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There are vast tracts of forest with no towns, no roads, and Canada does a tremendous job of cutting timber. They cut a lot of timber. That's not the problem. People complain, well, if you just cut the trees down, we won't have forest fires. Well, that's not really exactly accurate either, because it's not just the trees that are burning, and the big trees aren't the problem. It's the small trees that don't have any commercial value. You can't sell them. It's the brush. It's the dried, dead, down fuels. Um,
Mm. I,
so,
I want to take a helicopter back to the US if we could for a minute here, because the Forest Service lost almost 6,000 employees, 16% of its entire workforce in 6 months. That's according to USDA's own inspector general, more than any other agency in the department. What does that do to the work here?
well, that is a great question. So what you'll hear from the politicians is that they did not lay off any firefighters. Now that isn't 100% accurate because there are a lot of firefighters that are a part of the Forest Service system that don't necessarily ride around on a fire engine or work on a hotshot crew. They are doing other work like timber management, like recreation management, but they have the qualifications of firefighters. So when those folks got laid off, fired, whatever the term is, um, we lost firefighters, contrary to what we're hearing. In addition, and almost more importantly, we lost people who, on the big fires, like I was on operations section chief on the big incident management teams that manage those largest, most complex fires. Well, on a large fire, we on the team that manages that fire, we have many people who aren't firefighters. We have people who work in the finance section who pay all the bills, and there's a lot of bills. We have people who work in the logistics section who make sure the lunches are getting made and the showers are set up and the tools are sharpened. All those people who work in non-firefighting roles, those people, a lot of them lost their jobs. So we have fewer incident management teams to manage those largest fires right now than we did a couple years ago.
I
So
take your
there's
point,
a huge
Bobby.
impact.
You're saying that fighting fires is more complex than a lot of people might think it is, that there are many
Yeah.
different folks who are involved in the logistics of this. What do you make of the argument that the federal government, including the Forest Service, really had become bloated, that it wasn't operating well, and that it genuinely needed restructuring?
Well, I would not argue with anyone who said, well, there's waste in government. There's waste in any large organization. There were lots of ways that we could have looked at making the system more efficient. There wasn't any kind of a look at that. The firings occurred with people who were on probation, for example. And to be on probation, you either are a new employee or maybe you are a long employee, you've been employed for 20 years, but you took a promotion. And when you take a promotion, you're on probation. And so we lost employees who'd been with the agency for many, many years. So there was no analysis of where can we streamline the agency, where can we be more efficient, how can we use the tax dollars and give the taxpayer better bang for their buck. There was none of that. It was just we just started hacking. It was like trying to do surgery with an axe, and it didn't work. And so many employees that were laid off, fired, whatever the term is, have been asked to come back if they had fire calls. They've been asked to come back to work as a temporary employee during fire season. Mm-hmm. So how's that for a slap in the face and a help for morale? You get fired and then you get asked, hey, well, we needed you. Come back for the summer and help us out.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Bobby Scopa, 45 years fighting wildfire, retired operations section chief, author of Both Sides of the Fire Line. We're talking about where this smoke in the air is coming from and what it takes to fight it. Coming up, the people who actually do this work and what it costs them. Stay with us. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Bobby Scopa, 45 years fighting wildfire, retired operations section chief, author of Both Sides of the Fire Line. Her podcast is Bobby on Fire. We're talking about where this smoke in the air is coming from and what it takes to fight it. And Bobby, at the heart of this work, of course, are people. On June 27th, Emily Barker of Clinton Township was killed on the Knolls Fire. That was near the Colorado-Utah border, along with Nick Hutcherson and Sydney Watson. They were on a helitack crew, flown in by helicopter to get to new fires while they're still small. That's what you all would call the initial attack. I mean, that's the work that you've been describing. What do you want people to understand about that job and about these losses?
Well, there's a couple things I'd like folks to keep in mind. You know, these are young people who are having an adventure. They are hard workers. They want to do the best job they can. They have a love for the natural resources. They care about the communities that they're protecting. Now, that particular fire, and this year, you know, we've had more burnovers and injuries and fatalities now of helitack firefighters than others. So like some years we lose hot shots, some years we lose smoke jumper pilots. We lost a pilot already this year. So
why do you think that is?
Well, this is what I'm worried about. I'm worried that there is an emphasis. I don't know this to be true. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's been told to the firefighters, but I hear from firefighters. I was talking to a couple last night about this. They're worried, and I'm worried because they are, that There is such an emphasis on being aggressive to put out every single fire that we are taking risks that we might not need to be taking. There are many fires that ignite in the forest that go out without anyone ever touching them. And when I was a fire chief, I tried to evaluate those ignitions, and if that fire was going to go out without putting anyone at risk or spending tax dollars to put the fire out, if it was going to go out by itself and there was nothing at risk from that fire, I tried not to put people in those locations. And we've heard so much, and the firefighters have heard it, about being aggressive. We're going to put them all out. We're going to put them all out. Well, we
Bobby,
put people.
if I may
Yeah, go
jump
ahead.
in, because I'm just wondering where this is coming from. I mean, do you link that overly aggressive approach to the culture of the Trump administration? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what exactly has changed here.
I think it has to do with a lack of understanding of what goes on fires and fire management and fire suppression. I think it comes from maybe well-intentioned, like we don't want to lose timber, or we don't want to have fires threaten communities. Of course we don't. None of us do. And I think because there might be a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge about what goes on and what's the environment out there, that it's easy to say, just put them all out. Just put them out.
Hmm.
And that gets interpreted or misinterpreted, and people may be afraid for their jobs. If they're afraid for their jobs, by pushing back and saying, no, we shouldn't put people in that location, then we can end up taking risks that we shouldn't be taking. And imagine a helicopter coming in, and either, we have helicopter crews that come in and the helicopter lands and the firefighters get out, and we have helicopter crews where they actually just rappel down ropes, 150-foot ropes down through the tree canopy down to the fire. When you put people into those positions, it's like they didn't drive there. They don't have their fire engine to drive out with, or their crew carrier to get out with. We can put people into some very, very hazardous places.
Sure.
And what I would like people to think about is that we're talking about our sons and daughters and our brothers and our sisters that we're just kind of we're playing with their lives because, well, it sounds good. We're just going to put them all out. Well, you
Bobby,
know what? Yeah.
you've really helped to put us into the boots of many of the firefighters right now and what they're facing. I want to end by thinking a little bit about your story. Your memoir is called Both Sides of the Fire Line, and that title is doing double work. You fought fire as a man and as a woman. You transitioned between fire seasons in the late 1980s, mid-career.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
did that teach you about who gets listened to on a fire line?
Oh, well, that's a whole other topic. But you know, like many jobs that entail hard physical labor and that are predominant male, if you are 6 foot tall and have a big mustache, you're going to get listened to much quicker than if you're not 6 foot tall with a big mustache. And I never was. So I had issues and struggles prior to my transition, and then after my transition, life got easier for me at work because I think my perception was that the firefighters could deal with taking direction from a competent, strong female leader as opposed to a male that was not masculine enough. So for me personally, my career actually improved. I had a much easier time as a fire chief after I transitioned than I did before. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that was really my experience.
Bobby, 45 years on the fire line. If you were in the early part of your life today, would you still want to be a firefighter, given how much more intense wildfires have become, given all the things we've been talking about, including this overly aggressive approach that you're observing?
Personally, I would. At the same time, I might not be encouraging young people to go into firefighting for the federal government right now because there's too much unknown, there's too much politics going on. We're not doing a good job of using science to figure out and help us make the best decisions. I'm a bit of an oddity in that I like the challenge, and I kind of part of me wishes I was still working because I would like to have my nose in the middle of it and help direct the change that we need to make. But if I was a 20-year-old thinking about going to work as a wildland firefighter, I might not recommend the federal government right now just because there's so much controversy and politics going on right now.
Bobby Scopa is a retired wildland fire operations section chief and the author of Both Sides of the Fire Line, Memoir of a Transgender Firefighter. Her podcast is Bobby on Fire. Bobby, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.